So you think the government is going to help you or anyone out of anything? They're not. The government has never elevated anyone out of poverty and very rarely out of tragedy. There are a lot of people who just lost everything that, despite all these promises, aren't going to get any help.
What is the situation with the water? Obviously, in the Palisades, it ran out last night in the hydrants. I was talking to the firefighter on this block. They left because there was no water in the hydrant here.
The local folks are trying to figure that out. I mean, just when you have a system that's not dissimilar to what we've seen in other extraordinarily large-scale fires, and those hydrants are typical for 2 or 3 fires, maybe 1 fire. You have something at this scale, but again, that's going to be determined by the local.
Local blames federal, federal blames state, everybody blames everybody. While they promise the world, they're just going to blame each other when it doesn't get done. Just like how we got here. Never look to the government for help. Liberals are starting to realize this because normally these ivory tower libs don't have the reality of these tragedies touch them personally. Reality is like the greatest medicine for liberalism. We've seen libs all of a sudden petition the mayor to resign of LA or be recalled. Did the federal government help Maui? Well, yeah, here, guys, here's $750 for a fire that started with electrical equipment that the government regulates, that burned down the agricultural fields that the government made impossible to farm pineapples on because of more regulation. North Carolina, nope, they told half the people applying that they weren't eligible for the $750 FEMA loan. This weekend, the G-Man kicked 3,000 families this weekend out of FEMA housing during a snowstorm. North Carolina locals are literally building roads and bridges to, get back to their homes. And the government is going around shutting down these roads for not being inspected properly. Are you kidding me? They're revoking permits for tiny homes. And then on top of that, we know that FEMA, who's supposed to be helping people, was caught skipping the homes of Trump supporters. Could you imagine the outcry if Trump just threw up his hands and said, hey, sorry, LA, you guys voted for Kamala. You're not getting any help from the federal government. I mean, he's not going to do that because he's not a petulant child like Democrats are. But could you imagine? Our government, after confiscating half of our wealth every year in taxes, creates a crisis just like this. Government fostered every factor outside of the wind speed for these wildfires, and they blamed it all on climate change. And then 2 days later, the LAPD created a task force to investigate the fires. Thought they were climate change, right? The people that California elected passed really dumb laws that led to this. And you can't scream disinformation.
I don't know what he's referring to when he talks about the Delta smelt in reservoirs. The reservoirs are completely full, the state reservoirs here in Southern California. That mis and disinformation, I don't think advantages or aids any of us.
We do know, though, from reporting here locally that one reservoir that serves the Palisades was not full.
And that's exactly what triggered my desire to get the investigation to understand what was happening with that local reservoir. That was not a state system reservoir.
It was, I mean, that was at full, I don't know, 10 years ago. And then on the right, you see there, that doesn't look so full to me at the time of the fires, does it, Gavin? The reason some of your reservoirs were not full was because of incompetent management, which leads to not having enough water by somebody who was paid $750,000 to maintain them. To fight fires started in places that don't have forest management, with firefighters that were underfunded and understaffed because they were fired for not getting the vaccine, under-equipped because they gave their surplus equipment to Ukraine. And the reason you don't have insurance is because those same politicians, like Gavin Newsom, passed really bad laws that made California impossible for insurance companies to be profitable. So they just left. All of that is their fault. And to try to remedy the problem, it's like, I swear, it's like they watched our show here on Thursday. California has this neat little thing that is the Department of Redundancy Department, the EPA only for the state regulations, called CEQA. That's the California Environment Quality Act. LA has some of the strictest zoning laws in the country, and it takes a long time to get approved for anything. You want to change a window. And depending on what, where, and how big you intend to build, these can range from $500 to over $20,000. If you at any level received any state funds, they will likely include some sort of dumb DEI requirements. All new structures, they have to meet all these wild eco standards like earthquake standards and sustainability. And now, just like that, They're getting rid of all of those regulations and those environmental things and the permit because they realize that it's punitive to progress. Again, this is what happens when liberalism meets reality. But if those regulations were so necessary, Gavin, if they were put in place to, protect the environment when you're building one house and it's so important, you would think they would want to enforce it when they're building what might be 10,000 houses, right? The only reason they're suspending these ridiculous regulations is because they need people to move back in to maintain a tax base. That's the emergency. They don't care about you, but they think we're going to rebuild now after years of horrible governance? This is the same California government that was supposed to have a high-speed rail completed in 2020 for $33 billion. It is now 2025. They've spent $100 billion, and there's barely any track on the ground. It took California more than a month to count the votes in the last election, and they're going to rebuild a city? Right, my rear end. They won't be able to build a dog park, let alone a city. Their unions break their budget just maintaining infrastructure. Good luck paying for new. They also have to fund an $8.2 billion city pension liability program. The government, at all levels, can't do anything right. Everything they touch, with the exception of, the Manhattan Project, is an abject failure. Never trust the government. They're not coming to help you. They're coming to help themselves. The same government that literally named something the Affordable Care Act that made health care double in price after their nearly $2 billion website that didn't work. COVID, 14 days to flatten the curve. Turned out your kids just didn't go to school for some of them as long as 2 years, and now an entire generation can't read at an adequate level. But yeah, let's trust the government. How about that Ponzi scheme called Social Security? Hey, pay into this your whole life, and we'll kick it back to you a little bit. Not even all of it. Just for a few years after you retire. Oh, hey, that sounds great. Where can I view my balance? Ooh, yeah. Sorry, we spent all that money and ran the debt up to $36 trillion, and now we have to cut the little bit we did promise you. Sorry. But yeah, trust us this time. We got you for reals. This is the same government who said that we had to go into Iraq and Afghanistan for WMDs. I know, I was there. And then once we got there, they sent us green camouflage in the desert. If you think they can pass laws to make it better, you can't do that either. Gavin Newsom is now proposing laws to stop people from price gouging while rebuilding. Okay, this is spoken like someone who has absolutely no concept of supply and demand. You can't get the materials required by California building codes, some of which are still in place, because there's not enough of them, which means demand will push up costs. And even if you could get it, there's not enough people to build it, which means they're going to have to import contractors to the city in order to work, which costs money to house and feed and move everything out there. But good luck. You just grounded your project before it even began. And on top of all that, who's going to want to live there again? You're going to have to raise taxes to compensate for the over 10,000 properties no longer paying taxes, from commerce that doesn't exist anymore, from tourism that has no reason to come there anymore. Why? To rebuild in an area that you still can't get insurance in? Yeah, Biden says he's going to fund the whole thing, but he's gone in 6 days, thank God. That's a nice promise, but even if he had another 4 years, I still wouldn't believe him. He's the same guy that started his presidency by telling us that his son's laptop was fake and then ended his presidency by pardoning his son for everything on that very laptop. I don't trust them. You shouldn't either. The government's not coming to save you, ever. The government is not your parents, it's not your bank account, and it's not your contingency plan. And I hope this is a wake-up call for all those people.
He loves the Constitution. He fights for what's right. He hates the bad guys. He's a freedom warrior. He's your freedom warrior. Watch Carl Higbie every weekday on Newsmax.